I'm Susan Palmer. A couple weeks ago, I was asked by She Shreds Guitar Magazine if I would do a music theory class for them as part of their 2022 She Shreds One Riff a Day program. And so about a week ago, I actually had a live class on Zoom with many of the participants, and it was so much fun. But I wanted to give students who weren't able to attend the class, or maybe those who did attend and wanted to watch kind of some of the concepts over again, the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to cover the same topics that I went over in the class, and hopefully without the technical difficulties that we experienced during the class. And that'll give you an opportunity to kind of explore some of these ideas. So we're going to talk about hand stretches and ergonomics, scale theory, playing exercises, practicing rhythm, staying in time, and singing and playing guitar. And I'm going to try to get to all of those things in a similar format that I went over in the class. And yeah, so I want to kind of get started here just with a little intro about me. So like I said, my name is Susan Palmer. I've been playing guitar since I was about 11, and I began teaching when I was 14, which I know is kind of odd, but it's kind of in my blood. I really enjoy teaching. I taught for 12 years at Seattle University, and I also had a private studio, which I still have, although it's transitioned to online due to COVID. I have published 2 guitar method books. They're very thick books, and they're called the Guitar Lesson Companion Series. And they are, to my knowledge, the only method books out there that were designed to be used by students who are taking guitar lessons. So a lot of method books are, addressed to a student who is trying to study on their own. And since I know that the best way for students to learn this stuff is to work with a good teacher, just like an athlete works with a good coach, I designed these books to be a little more flexible than the standard guitar method books or guitar instruction that you find online. I also have a 5-year free online course that corresponds to the books as kind of a supplement to guitar lessons, and sometimes they can help students work through the material in the books if they haven't found a good teacher or are not able to, and for whatever circumstances. So let's dig into the topics here, and if you want to skip ahead to different things, I've got the chapters listed, so you can do that too. And yeah, I'm really excited to work with you today. So the first thing I wanted to go over, She Shreds asked me to talk about some hand stretches, and I added ergonomics to it because I only teach, or I only really practice 2 hand exercises or stretches. And the first one is just a standard where I'm using my left hand here, and I'm just gently pulling my fingers back toward me. You want to do that 2 or 3 times. And then the opposite way. So I kind of bend my wrist that way, my hand down. And just a few times of doing that. So my big thing when I'm playing and when I'm teaching stuff is I try to stay loose. And, I always say, I want to try to be a noodle. So I try to emulate that when I'm practicing or before I practice. I think that's really important because when we're playing guitar, we're often trying to learn something and we're trying really hard, and sometimes in the trying process, we're actually really pressing those strings down or gripping our guitar necks a little more hard than we need to. And so that extra energy that you're expending into the instrument actually just goes up back into your joints. And so that's why I try to be a noodle and, stay relaxed with everything. Sometimes I've had a Post-it note on my music stand that just says relax, just so that I kind of keep that in mind when I'm playing. One thing that I think is really important is to have your guitar situated in a comfortable playing position. And I use these little pillows here. They work really well to hold my guitar up on my lap. So sometimes I put them on my left knee here, and other times I put them on my right. But, they just offer a nice, raised situation here so that I can focus on my playing and my guitar's in a nice position, and I'm real even with that. Sometimes, I will use 2 if I need the guitar neck even higher to facilitate whatever it is that I'm working on. And, those 2 things, holding your guitar upright, I think is really important. I know a lot of classical musicians, they use footstools, but the issue with the footstool is that you're going to put one leg higher than the other. And in doing that, you set yourself off balance. And so I don't think that is, or at least for me, that's not the best way to go. Now, there is one other thing that I like to use, and It's this attachment. I have it on this guitar here, my Duo Sonic, and it's kind of, it raises the guitar up like so. And again, puts it in a really nice playing position, so I don't have to think about, I don't have to think about a guitar strap. Guitar straps for me are something that they've been useful for me in the past, and I found them to be a little uncomfortable as I'm getting older. So I tend to use the cushions or the brace for the guitar. I'll have those links below in the description box if you're on YouTube. I'll also post them on the web page that I've got below as well for you to link to those. And I've got them linked to an Amazon site because I'm an Amazon affiliate. So if you can buy these in your local shop, then I encourage you to do that. If you do use Amazon, I just want you to know that you'd be helping me support my guitar scholarship fund for students. So, they give me a small kickback from every purchase made from people who enter through my little shop site there. And that helps my my guitar students out quite a bit. So those are the two things that I like to use in terms of supports. One other thing I wanted to say about straps was I think straps are really cool to use, especially if you're practicing sitting and standing. If you can have your guitar set at a level or a height that works, whether you're standing or sitting, I think that's really beneficial. I used to do that more often when I was performing or, standing up and sitting down throughout the day. So I think straps can be great. They also make like these crossover straps so that they come around both sides. I haven't found those to be super effective for me, but those things exist. I think it's most important just to find a guitar system that works for you. And also realize that may change. I know I've said this before, that I feel like I wake up each day with a different body. And so, sometimes I want one pillow, sometimes I want two pillows, sometimes, one guitar adjustment program works better for me than another one. So I have lots of options that I choose just depending on how I feel. So I think having that flexibility is really important. Now, when I'm working with students in my studio, what I watch out for in terms of their hand position, basically for that relaxation. So I want to see them, not tensing up too much. Sometimes that presents in your neck, definitely in your hand. And so I watch out for that. I also look out for, if I see somebody's wrist really bent, that's going to cut off your circulation and not be such a great idea. So what I encourage people to do is just kind of drop their hand down to its natural position there, and then bring it up, see how nice and straight that is, and then put that on the guitar so that you're not doing this. And what I find a lot of people struggle with is that in when they're putting the guitars up and when they're playing, they sometimes want to lock their elbow close to their body. And I think it's important, and it's kind of silly to bring this up, but your arm has a lot of movement to it. It can move all over the place. And so there are lots of ways you'll discover if you pay attention to this and give it some time. There are lots of ways that you can develop a straight wrist, a healthy position there while also being flexible with how you play. So I think, just keeping those things in mind. I know another thing I watch out for, I don't have an issue if somebody uses their thumb every now and then to play a chord. But if I see a technique that a guitar student is using that seems like it might inhibit their playing, so maybe if you're doing this all the time, it kind of limits your speed in getting to those other notes there. So I might bring that up. Or if I see something that, just looks like it might cause problems down the road, I'll probably bring that to their attention. But a lot of guitar players hold their guitars in different ways. And, as long as something is, comfortable and working and doesn't seem to limit them, then, I kind of let my opinion be known. But, I want that person to have their personality come through and their style. I want them to be able to express all the emotions in the way that makes sense for them on the instrument. So hopefully you have gone to my website and you have downloaded the PDF that I have there. And on this PDF, we're going to use this to study the chromatic scale. We are going to construct major scales, minor scales, and also major pentatonic scales and minor pentatonic scales. So if you don't have that, then look in the description box and you'll find a link to that. But I would get that printed out, or if you have some kind of electronic device, you can write on that. And as a last resort, you're welcome to just use a blank piece of paper. You can do all of this just with a blank piece of paper as well. And I would recommend using a pencil because, I mean, you're going to make mistakes most likely, and it's just nice to have that pencil there ready to fix the situation. So anyways, there's some things in music theory that are easily explained. They have a reason behind them. And then there's other things that are a bit more mysterious. And in my music theory classes, I'd often just say, it just is that way. So there's a few things I want to start with that they just are that way. And one is the chromatic scale. And the chromatic scale it contains all 12 of the notes that we use. You'll notice that, we have 12 frets on the guitar before it repeats. So we have 12 notes that we're going to be working with here. And first step is I just want to spell out the chromatic scale on the A string of the guitar so you can see the half steps there and just kind of get to know some of those notes in that chromatic scale. So on the A string, I've got open A, and then A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and A. And then on the way back, I'm going to use flats. It's kind of a music teacher trick to get students to learn it both ways. Some of those notes are, they have two different spellings. It's called enharmonic notes, and we'll cover that here in a second. But first, I'm just going to descend the chromatic scale, this time using flats. And if you're listening to this video and kind of looking at the worksheet, I think that would be most helpful. So descending the chromatic scale, starting from that note A, so right on the double dot where the guitar repeats itself. So again, this is A, and that's another A. We have A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, and A. And you'll notice that for some of those notes, they have two different spellings. It's the same exact pitch. So, for example, the first one that shows up, this note right here on the first fret of the A string, it's the note A sharp or B flat. So we have two different ways that we can spell that. And I get into why that is important in another video that I made. So last year in 2021, I recorded one lesson riff each day. And in that lesson riff each day, I went through major scale construction in a much more in-depth version than what we're going to do here. There's PDFs and, the whole shebang for that. I'll put the link to that below. I'll probably drop it here in the corner so you could link directly to that as well if you wanted to just watch that. But in that video, I'm going to get into a little bit more about the chromatic scale, why we use those flats. And that has to do with, I bring that up when we're talking about major scale construction for the flat keys. So for right now, I think it's important for you to notice that. And, that is something that kind of comes up as we go. A lot of times, you have to kind of trust me with just this base knowledge of here's some things that just are. And then throughout your study of music, you kind of fill in some gaps here and there. And over the years of studying different books and working with different teachers, you tend to form a more complete understanding of what's going on. So as for trying to understand everything all in one lesson, thoroughly and practically, I don't know if that's going to happen for you. So take what you can from this and use the other resources that I've offered and other people are offering as well. One thing I do think is really important to notice, though, is in the chromatic scale, we're covering all half steps. And I want you to notice that, between the note A and A sharp, that's a half step, but also between the note B and C is a half step. So we don't always have a sharped note or a flatted note in between. And I think you can see that illustrated on the worksheet there in a way that makes more sense, perhaps. So moving along, there's one other thing that it kind of just is the way it is, and that is a major scale. So if I play these notes here, what I'm looking for is for you to notice, oh, that sounds familiar. It sounds like a scale. If you've got that where you can hear that as like, that sounds pretty normal, it sounds like something, that's great. That's our starting point. So what I just played there was a C major scale. I played the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And regardless of knowing the notes or not, what is important to notice in that C major scale is that there's a pattern of half steps and whole steps that I'm playing. So from this note to this note is a whole step. We have another whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step. And what's really cool is that you can apply that pattern of half steps and whole steps to any note, and you'll get that same major scale sound. It'll be rooted in a different tonic key, but it will still sound like a major scale. So if I play that here, I've got another major scale. It's just in a different key. And you might want to experiment with that on your guitar and just see, like, I know some of you know the notes, some of you don't, but just see if you can hear what sounds like a major scale to you. And that's kind of a good exercise to do. So if you can hear that that's a major scale, wonderful. That's our great starting place there. What we're going to do today is learn how to construct that on paper. So kind of the music theory portion of this. One thing to note is that music always comes first. You can understand that sounds like a major scale before understanding, well, the notes I'm playing, or, what that looks like on notation paper, or what that looks on, the worksheet that I've given you. So the music always comes first. The theory usually follows the music to try to explain what's going on. That's my philosophy. What we're going to do is first just analyze these notes. So on your worksheet, I listed out the C major scale, and I'm going to play those notes, and we're going to talk about those half steps and whole steps. So when I play C to D, that's a whole step. I've got, there's one note in between there, which would be C sharp, so I'm not playing that. That would be a half step. So C to D is a whole step. D to E is also a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. And then B to C is a half step. So the C major scale, or any major scale, is comprised entirely of whole steps, except for between the 3rd and the 4th degree, and the 7th and the 8th. And that's why I put those numbers underneath the scale. So if you want to, and I would encourage you to do this, I would draw in on your worksheet there some kind of marker between, it could just be a dash between the E and the F and the B and the C, just to note that that's where those half steps are on there. So next up, we're going to construct some other major scales. We're going to start with the G major scale. And we have 3 steps we're going to follow. So hear me out with all of them for each one, and just kind of follow along, and we will construct that G major scale. So the first step is to write in the letter names that follow G in consecutive order. So that's going to be, the first note is written in there for you, which is G. Then we have A, and then B, C, D, E, F, and then G. So that's step 1. That's all you had to do, is just write out those natural notes in the key, or not in the key, but just starting on the note G and continuing on until G. So our chromatic scale, I should say this too, our main pitches that we use, the natural notes, they're comprised of the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So we have the notes, or the letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it repeats itself. So we're starting in the key of G here. We'll start on G and just continue. We kind of loop around to the note A, or the letter A, and repeat on through until we get to G again. So we've got 7 letter names that we use. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to drop down that half step pattern that you wrote into the C major scale when we were analyzing that. So you're going to make a little dash mark between the 3 and the 4, and also between the 7 and the 8. And now our third step here is we're going to go back and look at those notes and see if we can have them fit the formula of that half step and whole steps. Because right now those notes do not spell a major scale. They spell a scale, but it's not a major scale yet. So we need to apply the pattern of half steps and whole steps to that in order to construct that G major scale. So let's just analyze it, 2 notes at a time. So the distance from G to A, that's a whole step. From A to B, that's a whole step. From B to C, is a half step, and lo and behold, that's what we need right there. We needed a half step between the 3 and the 4. So that's perfect so far. The C to the D is a whole step, so that's good. D to E is a whole step. Now E to F, that's a half step, but our formula says that we need a whole step there. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the pitch of that note F to F sharp. And so we're going to drop down that F sharp sign, and when we do that, that also gives us the half step that we need from F sharp to G. So now we have a G major scale. So before we applied that pattern of half steps and whole steps, these were our notes. Not that. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it sounds kind of scale-like. It is a scale. It's a Mixolydian scale, but that's another day. But when we added that F sharp, we created this pattern of notes. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So now we have a G major scale. So that's our process. You first write in those letter names. Second is you're going to drop down that pattern of half steps and whole steps. And then the third is to analyze each two notes pairing at a time and make sure that they fit the formula. Now, all the scales that we're doing here on this worksheet are going to be using sharps in order to increase the pitch of one note to make it fit the formula. So I'm going to, because this video, I don't want it to get too long, and I've already got a very detailed explanation of that in the 2021 She Shreds video. I'm going to let you go ahead and find that. Again, I have links directly to everything on my website, which you can find. And again, there's PDFs. I do not only major scale construction for the sharp keys, but also the flat keys. We talk about the circle of fourths and fifths. There's a giant amount of information in there. So I would encourage you to check that out if you want to do more with that particular major scale. So you may want to pause the video here and go ahead and fill out the rest of those major scale forms, and then I'll come back on and we'll go ahead and talk about those and get into some major pentatonic scales and the rest of this program. So next up, we're going to cover major pentatonic scales. And these are major scales, but they contain 5 tones or 5 notes. So pent means, like a pentagon has 5 sides to it. So a pentatonic scale has 5 tones or 5 notes in it. And you're going to see that there's another reason why I wrote those numbers beneath all of those major scales. So, they are definitely helpful for constructing those major scales. So you see that pattern of half steps and whole steps. But they're also helpful because a pentatonic scale, a major pentatonic scale, contains the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 from the major scale. So for the key of C, that would give us the notes C, D, E, G, and A. So on your worksheet, there is space provided for you to fill that out and find all of the notes that are in those other keys for the pentatonic scales. So I'm going to show the answers here. So go ahead and pause the video, work that out, and then you can check your work. All right, if you've made it this far, I gotta say, you're doing great. This is a lot of information I'm trying to throw at you here and, give you an intro to all of this stuff. So my hat is off to you for getting this far. So next I want to get into the natural minor scales. There are various minor scales, but today we're going to focus on the most common, which is the natural minor scale. And we're going to rely on those numbers, those scale degrees underneath the major scales once again. And that's going to help us to construct the natural minor scales. So the first one, and this is on the back side of the PDF, the first one is the C natural minor scale. And for all of the natural minor scales, we're going to take the same notes from a major scale, but we're going to lower the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th degree. Now, just to simplify things, I use what a lot of music teachers use, which is the lowercase b as a way of notating a lowered note. So typically that lowercase b or a flat sign, that's telling us to add a flat. But in this case, I'm using it to is a formulaic device to let you know that we're going to be lowering each pitch. And that's going to come up in just a minute here. So for the key of C, if we write out the C major scale in the space for that C natural minor scale, that'd be our first step. So we write out the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And then our next step is to follow the formula, which I have written directly underneath that, that scale, those notes there, just like for the major pentatonics. And what you're going to do is you're going to lower the third degree. So our third degree is E. So we're going to add a flat to that so that that note becomes E flat. The next one that we need to alter is the note A. So that's our sixth degree. And that one we also need to lower. So we're going to lower that A to an A flat. And the last one is the note B. So we're going to lower that B to a B flat. And now we have the notes in a C natural minor scale. Next up, I want to do the key of G. So the key of G, we're going to, first step is just write out those notes in the major scale, right where that natural minor scale is, and then we're going to adjust it to make it fit the formula. So our notes in the G major scale, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. And so the third degree is B natural, but we're going to lower that to B flat. The sixth degree is E, and we need to lower that. So that's going to become E flat. And the seventh degree, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, which is why I wanted to walk you through this one. The seventh degree is F sharp. And like I've said, we need to lower that by a half step. So F sharp is not going to become F flat. F sharp becomes F natural. So you'll just erase that sharp sign there, which is why I wanted you to use a pencil. So I want you to fill out the rest of those, and then you can check your work. So go ahead and pause the video, fill out the rest of them, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, we are in the home stretch of the music theory scale construction. We are on to minor pentatonic scales. Minor pentatonic scales are beloved by most guitar players. They're often the first scales that we get to know and play, and they're actually very easy to construct considering all of the work that you've done so far. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop the 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7th notes from each one of those natural minor scales that you constructed above. Now, another way to think of this is you could think of it as the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, and the flat 7 from a major scale. So that's why I have that notation on the paper. It got a little confusing here as far as which way I wanted to present that. So I decided to talk you through it both ways. But again, you just need to drag and drop those scales, those scale degrees from the natural minors above, and you should be good to go. So go ahead and take a minute to do that, and I'll have the answers up here in a second for you. So there's one other thing I want to get into with these minor scales, and that is the difference between parallel minor and relative minor. Now, we've been thinking of these natural minor scales as being parallel to their respective major scale. So C major, we took those notes, we lowered the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th degrees, and we came up with the C natural minor scale. So C major related to C natural minor. We constructed G major, and then we constructed G minor. So those are parallel. There's another way to think about the relationships between major and minor scales, and that is in a relative fashion. And if you look at the key of C, the key of C has no sharps or flats in it. It's just one of the kind of things that is in music. And if we also look at the key of A minor, we'll notice that that also has no sharps or flats in it. So the key of C major and the key of A minor share the same key signature. So those two keys are related. So C major is related to A minor. They both have 0 sharps or flats in them. And so every major scale has a relative minor. And if you look at the major scale, it'll be the 6th degree of that major scale. That will tell you what the relative minor key is. And that will be the key that shares the same key signature. So whatever, if there's 1 sharp, if it's the key of G major, then its relative minor will be the key of E minor. And it's kind of a cool thing in music to know about that. I think it's helpful when you're communicating with other musicians, and it's just something you want to keep in mind when you look at a key signature. And again, that's something that I did talk about a little bit more in depth in 2021's She Shreds One Riff a Day, or One Lesson Riff a Day is what I made it. So you may want to check that out, and if you want to learn more about relative major and minor keys. So that's what I wanted to say about those scales, those natural minor and major scales. We got the major pentatonics and minor pentatonics. I hope that was helpful. These scales, I consider them little recipes for sounds. They each have their own flavor. And, I tend to think of scales as being very, very broad kind of scenes that they create. And in my playing and in my teaching, I really focus on chord tones with my students. And that's something that we don't have time for in this video. Again, I think I covered some of that in 2021's version of my She Shreds. And it's also the main topic of the Guitar Lesson Companion Volume 2. But I just want to kind of add that in there as to so you kind of know what's next, what's after all of these scales. How do you get better at sounding more specific over the chords that you're soloing over? And again, that's chord tones. All right, well, let's move right along. So on the web page that corresponds to this lesson, I've got 2 areas of study. So there's a major scale study and a minor scale study. And if you go in each one of those, you'll find not only the major scales, the patterns there for you, but also the major pentatonic patterns. And in the minor version, you'll find the minor pentatonic scales there as well. And I also have on there 12 backing tracks, one for each key or each root note for each one of those keys. And that's so that you can get to know those scale patterns really well in any key and get some good rehearsal time on those. For the jam tracks, I listed the chords, so if you want to throw in chord tones, if you're that far along, or you want to play some chords over that, that's also, I left room in the track for you to do that. They're very basic tracks, just so you can get in and do the work of playing those chords and scales and really hearing what's going on and get better at this stuff. Now, in my book, The Guitar Lesson Companion Volume 1, the way that I teach this stuff to my students is we go over all of this in the key of E minor first for the E minor scales. And there's some linking studies in the book because I like students not just to know each pattern, but to kind of know how to navigate the neck. And there's some ways that there's some routes that are tried and true, and I've got one of those listed. But then what I try to do is help my students learn every possible movement between patterns, and that's what those linking studies do. So it's a very in-depth study of that if you're interested. Then I do the same thing for the key of A minor, and then from there, then students work through 12 keys. So I don't just kind of throw students out in the open of like, here's your scale patterns, here's all 12 keys. So to you, if you're new to this stuff, I would suggest either 1, picking up the book and finding a good teacher, or 2, just taking one pattern at a time so that you really, really get to know it, and maybe playing that one pattern in all of the keys. So I was just discussing the minor pentatonics. For the major scales in the book, I do have everything written out in the key of C, and then what I encourage students to do is we go through all the note reading studies up from root position or open position all the way through the 12th fret. And that, in conjunction with some scale studies and some chord studies, really helps kind of unlock the guitar neck so that you really see those notes. One thing that was brought up in our live class was, suggestions for learning all of the notes on the neck. And what I want to say, and what I did say during the class on that, is that it really takes more than one approach. So, I think those, a scale study like what we're doing is one way to do it. Reading music is another way to do it. I use some chord exercises with my students. So you get to see it kind of in a 3D format, because you may understand the names of the notes in one way, like maybe chromatically, or maybe just on the E string, you have a couple landmarks that you know. But when you're playing, sometimes a note, it you lose the name of it depending on what finger you use to play it, just because, it throws you off. The guitar neck is huge. So I think having, many approaches to studying the notes on the neck, and also a good teacher can help, isolate if there is a really big issue or a blind spot on the guitar neck, or one way of thinking about it that isn't as clear as it should be. I know that some teachers and some of my students have pointed out these apps or online programs for, just naming notes. And, I think that may be one approach that you would want to use, but I don't think that that's going to help you really understand the neck in its full complexity in every situation. I also think that, those kind of studies, those little app note identification studies, aren't very musical. And, I think that what we're here to do is to learn music and to play music. And, I don't want to play like a robot. So, I think having that musical approach and your learning exercises be as musical as possible is going to help you play the music, but also understand the guitar neck even better. That being said, there's a lot of teachers, there's a lot of different perspectives. And, I always say, it's kind of like chocolate chip cookies. I like so many different recipes for chocolate chip cookies, So it's not that you have to follow what I say. I think you should, try a bunch of different approaches, try some different teachers, and see what really works best for you. You are the one that is ultimately going to be able to, who needs to filter all of this information and apply it. I often think of, Olympic athletes, and just imagine how many coaches they have throughout their careers, and, all of the study that they do, all of the practice that they do with everything. And, I like to think about that when I'm teaching music, and also when I'm teaching myself music, or working with my teacher. I like to, kind of put myself in the same mindset of how I'm approaching my practice. So in a nutshell, take a variety of approaches to this stuff. I hope you do enjoy those jam tracks. You reach out if you have questions on that stuff. I'm more than happy to help. Hopefully there'll be some comments here that I can help you get the answers that you need. And I'm thinking about doing, some more YouTube live videos or something like that, so we can kind of hit this stuff that way too. So I hope that helps, and let's move right along. I think in practicing your rhythm, probably the most important thing to do is to listen to a lot of different music and to copy the rhythms that you like, whether that's from a solo or a chord part. I think that in my studio, the most important thing that I try to teach students is to strum down on downbeats and up on upbeats. For the most part, there are situations where that is not the requirement for the tune, but for the most part, that is. So, if you take a song, you can see my right hand is continuously moving down and up throughout that, even though I'm not always hitting the strings. And by keeping this momentum of down, up, I'm also keeping time. I'm helping my band kind of stay in time, and, I always know where I'm at. And I've had students, they come back and they try to play that song, and they're playing it like, and they're playing the right rhythm, it sounds right, but that kind of playing where you're hitting downstrokes only on the parts of the rhythm where you hear, that actually is what I consider a bad habit, or one that might limit you in what you could do later on with a more complicated song. So I try to teach my students, first of all, to, get their right hand just swinging, and we do a lot of scratch rhythm workouts, just so I'm just kind of muting the strings here. And, just trying to get a general sound on that, but also really practicing that right hand so that it's consistently moving down and up. And that's where air guitar really comes in handy. So, I learned how to play guitar when I was a kid, and there was no shame in playing air guitar in my bedroom. So I encourage people to play air guitar. Listen to your favorite song and, just kind of get your right hand moving a little bit. If you've got a guitar handy and you can create, some of the scratch rhythms and find some rhythms in there, I think that's just a fantastic way to practice your rhythm. Now, if you want like a real logical, approach to all this, you can get a book like mine, The Guitar Lesson Companion, Volume 1, that has a bunch of rhythms, and you can learn them in a real methodical way. Again, with a teacher who's going to be real adamant about keeping the downstrokes on the down beats and upstrokes on the up beats. So that's one approach. Drum books are also great. I know a lot of guitar players who pull rhythms from those, so that's another option. And I also want to kind of slide right into keeping time and having a steady time. And I mentioned this during the live video of how I heard Bruce Foreman, a guitar player, talk about this. So, and I agreed with what he said. So I'm going to share with that. First of all, I think you should practice your tunes at a variety of tempos. So use a metronome, use a drum track. There's tons of them online. I have one that I'll drop in here too, that goes through 4 different patterns of drum beats, just so you can, learn how to play a guitar part over that, whether it's a single line or some chord stuff. Metronomes are my best friend. I have so many of them because I like the different sounding clicks. So metronomes are great. Play them at a variety of tempos. There's a lot of tricks with metronomes, like what beat you put them on. So you could click it. You could make that click happen on 1, 2, 3, 4, or you could do it like a jazz musician and just have that metronome be clicking on beats 2 and 4, or just on beat 4, or beat 2 every other bar. So there's a lot of ways that you can configure these, and there's some great videos that have already been done on that. So I'm not going to get too in depth on that, but I do want to stress the importance of practicing with a metronome. Now, the other thing that Bruce said that I really agree with as well was how what playing with a metronome really does for your playing is it gets you some practice of playing with other people because you're outside of yourself. You have to listen to what is going on outside of just you and your guitar. And that's a really important concept. That's an important skill to have while you're playing with other people. So playing with a metronome, it does help you improve your speed and help you learn to stay in time better. But really what it's doing is getting you used to playing with somebody other than yourself. And I think that's a really important skill. I want to thank you for watching this long. This has turned into a longer video than I had thought, but there's just so much that I want to share with you, and I love this community so much. She Shreds is incredible, and for what they've done to bring people together, people like me, and just other women players, non-binary players. They just offer such a great platform and community for connection, and especially during these times, I think it's super beneficial. So thank you for watching this far. And the last thing I want to get into is singing and playing guitar. And no, I am not going to sing for you. I don't like my singing, but I do want to share some tips that may help you if that's one of your goals, especially if you're playing a song with a complicated guitar rhythmic part. So my first suggestion is to learn how to sing the song and learn the rhythm guitar part separately. Be able to do both, and if you've got that, then if you're singing and playing and you notice that you're having a hard time, one thing you can do is reduce those chords to whole notes. And, just keep the rhythm, very simple and, as you're changing your chords and you're singing. So keep that rhythm very simple. Use a metronome, or a drum track so you stay in time with that. But practice it that way. Move it to half notes and then quarter notes. And then go ahead and try singing the correct rhythm, try playing the correct rhythm while you're singing the words and everything that way. If that is really hard to do, even with the whole notes, what I would encourage you to do is record yourself playing the chord part. Very simple, so just use whole notes. Record that, and then practice playing those whole notes while you're singing with your recorded performance where it's accurate. If that works, then try half notes, and then try quarter notes, and then try it with the real rhythm. So record yourself playing the real rhythm of the song and practice singing and playing. And what's probably going to happen is you're going to, kind of skip a step every now and then, skip a beat, or, something's just going to feel off. But if you're playing with your own recording of it, or maybe even the original recording, then you're going to have that guide to kind of hold on to. So those would be some of my suggestions for singing while playing guitar. I hope I got to everything that you wanted and more in this video. I just appreciate you guys watching and checking this out. And again, the She Shreds community, you guys have my heart. I'm thrilled to be able to offer this video, and also the class was a lot of fun too. So hopefully we'll find something to get that, that kind of simultaneous learning happening again. Maybe another live video or something would be in order. So thanks so much. I hope you guys have fun practicing this stuff. If you want to support my guitar studio, I'm always creating new ways to generate revenue for my scholarship fund. I'm an Amazon affiliate. I'm a TrueFire affiliate. I've got all those links below. So, please check that out. If you use any of those, that would be really helpful to some of my students and for me too. So thanks again. And I'll be here next time.